Hi everyone, this is Lou. So this is in response to Anonymous when you were saying that you have a townhouse and you're renting out a room and now the tenant has broken lease. You've got 3 months to go. Tenant actually hasn't handed over the property to you until approximately the time that you secured a new tenant. And that's approximately 5 weeks from the date that the vacating tenant had given notice. Now, under the Residential Tenancies and Roomings Accommodations Act, the break lease situation for roomings accommodation is exactly the same as the break lease for a standard dwelling. So you'll be treating it exactly the same. So here are the key elements. Because your tenant stopped paying their rent since they gave you notice for a break lease, it doesn't automatically give them the right to stop paying the rent. So you should have treated this as two separate things. One, breaching them for failure to pay rent and failure to hand over, and the other one, obviously, you still have to, under section 362, ensure that you're mitigating their exposure to liability, which you did. So you were advertising and you weren't able to secure someone until 5 weeks later. So importantly, now that the bond is in dispute and you need to take this to QCAT, you are going to have to ensure that firstly, you have everything absolutely documented. So I want you to prioritize the sequence of events that have occurred, because you need to validate what you did and when you did it so that you can satisfy the various sections of the legislation. In order for you to be successful at QCAT, you need to ensure that you are complying with your obligations under the legislation and proving that the tenant had breached their obligations under the tenancies agreement. All right, so you've got your lease, you've got your notification of the intended break lease, and you need your evidence of your efforts to resource another tenant. Now, the rule under the break lease with your tenant is that they are, according to you, they've still got 3 months to go. So they're sitting in the 75%. So if it's less than 75%, so it's between 50 and 75%, then they have to provide 2 weeks as compensation of rent after they actually vacate the date. So this is really important for you, because based on the information that you have given me, you have said that the tenant had given notice, but they still had their possessions in there. They still retained the keys, and they did not officially hand back the keys until approximately 5 weeks after they actually gave you that notice. All right, so despite the fact that they said that they have given you their notice of intention to break lease, the fact that they actually haven't given you your property back and they still had items inside your property, that means that they did not hand over that property to you. So you are still entitled to make that request and claim on the rents for that appropriately. If the tenant wanted to get away with a full clean break lease, they should have given you their 2 weeks notice, and then moved out within that 2 weeks, given you back the key, completely cleared out their, in this instance, room, so that you can do a vacate inspection. And should anyone be able to move in earlier, then they will move in straight away. So you will come a cropper if you allowed them to do that, or there is an agreement to do that. But even if you did so, that's going to restrict who is going to be able to move into that room anyway. Because if you secured someone, for example, at the 2 week mark, after the notice of intention to leave had been provided to you, and your old tenant still had their possession in there and they still had the key, well, that room is not ready for the next tenant to take over. So that's where your tenant has breached their obligation to mitigate your exposure, as well as not handing over the property to you appropriately, so that you can actually do the vacate inspection and prepare that property for the next tenant, so that you could do a 24 turnaround if you needed to. All right, so there's that particular situation as well. So you can see where I'm coming from. There's both ends that you need to actually deal with in this regard to make sure that your case is a successful case. Now, the next thing that you need to consider, obviously, is the fact that the tenant, okay, if it is 3 months to go, they have to pay 1 week's compensation. So this is the time frame that you actually have, and that is in relation to how much rent that 1 week you are entitled to. So you can't charge for any advertising costs or any other out-of-pocket expenses that you had to incur as a landlord. That supposedly compensation for you represents 1 week that they are entitled to pay after they have handed over the property. All right, so you are entitled to 1 week after they've handed over the property. So you need to identify the point in time where they actually handed over the property back to you and how many days it was when a new tenant, your property was ready when the new tenant moved in. Now, if that is a 3-day period, then you're only allowed to charge them the 3 days, but you are entitled to all the rent that they had not paid prior to them handing you your property back. All right, so you are entitled to that amount of rent. And so in relation to the break lease fee, then, if it's just the 3 days before the new tenant moves in and it's in that 7-day week, then you are only allowed to claim up until the day that the tenants moved in. All right, so this is how it works. There is some meaning to the madness of the legislation, although it seems to have skewed unfairly back to the landlords, but you can prorata some of the reletting expenses. However, it's so close to the end, it doesn't really matter, but you're now contesting the bond and any of the rents that are owed to you. So this is how you facilitate your argument when you are presenting it to QCAT. Now, going to QCAT, you will be using the Form 2, but you will need the Notice of Unresolved Dispute. According to you, the reconciliation has come to naught. Therefore, the RTA conciliator should have sent you a Notice of Unresolved Dispute. And okay, it starts off with a capital M and a series of numbers. You need to insert that into your QCAT form. In this instance, I am not quite sure. I don't think that it's going to be an urgent one anymore because it is bond related. So it is a non-urgent application because the tenant has already moved out of your property. Normally, the urgent applications are reserved for severe cases like rent arrears and major damage to a property, or domestic violence and those really serious issues. But in this particular instance, tenant's already given you your property back. You're resolving it. Now you're only disputing the bond. Unfortunately, you're going to have to wait until tribunal in order for the member at QCAT or adjudicator to determine what the outcome is and how much you are entitled to. So based on my reasoning and the information that you have given me, it seems like you have a pretty good case to do so. So you will just need to present all that evidence as such. Now, if you need anything else, feel free to reach out to me. Have a lovely day.